Hello everybody. Welcome back. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about something really interesting. It's actually a topic that is near and dear to my heart, very much so, actually, which is 5-MeO DMT, and in particular, how to maximize the chances of a good experience that is beneficial to you, beneficial to your friends, family, the world at large, something that, you get something useful out of it, um, rather than have, a very unpleasant experience, something that is traumatizing, something that will leave you with a bad kind of like taste on your soul, so to speak, which absolutely happens. And it is a sensitive thing because, it is one of the most, if not the most profound experiences that you can have in your life. Must be qualified and qualified because there's a lot of other things that are, of course, extremely profound. Um, and I do suggest taking it very seriously, honestly. Um, I do think, you can do it safely. You can do it in a way that is very wholesome, spiritually aligned, beneficial. But it does take a little bit of preparation. And the more you kind of like put in, the more you will get back. Um, before I get into it, let me give you the quality of the day, which it's actually quite aligned with a lot of kind of like QRI ideas. This is Conolidine. You can actually get it in Walmart now. This one in particular, I got it from Amazon. You can also get it from that particular website. I hope we find a way to kind of like get it in bulk and do experiments with it. Um, I'll just provide a little bit of context for why this matters. So first of all, I think, all else being equals for most people, taking opiates is a bad idea. Like, oh, I'm just going to try heroin. I'm just going to try and see what, shooting heroin does to me. Is like, no, don't do that. I do not recommend it. Not from experience. I have not personally, ever injected heroin or morphine or anything of the sort. But just like the area under the curve is just not worth it. I mean, like most people who go that route, they will regret it. That said, there are, a couple, you know, subtleties here. Like, first of all, some people suffer extreme pain constantly, chronic pain, and they need opiates for pain relief. And I really, really do not like the aesthetic of, oh, you should just use THC or weed or mindfulness or whatever, because no, severe pain is a serious thing. It's not something you can, brush off. And that whole narrative of, hey, the opiate crisis in the US is caused by doctors overprescribing opiates, it really does not seem to be true. It is more kind of like a anti-capitalist, anti-pharma aesthetic that kind of like unfortunately is used for political purposes. Like, no, actually, it has much more to do with things such as cheap fentanyl. It's not that. And the problem too is that the backlash is that a lot of people with severe chronic pain end up actually having their prescribed opiates removed for ideological reasons, which is a massive ethical tragedy. Anyway, not to speak on my soapbox too much about that, but the point is, we do require therapies for tackling severe chronic pain, serious kinds of like pain conditions, also like intractable depression. I mean, like intractable depression does respond to opiates, and I think properly dosed is reasonable for people who have severe depression to be prescribed opiates. There's other conditions for which it also makes sense. I mean, severe akathisia, um, and even schizophrenia. I mean, like, antipsychotics have so many side effects and they're so bad for you long term that I actually am very open minded about the possibility that prescribing gentle, good opiates to people with schizophrenia might actually be better for their well being in the long term than giving them something like, Abilify or, any of the heavy antipsychotics. Anyway, this is very controversial. I don't want to get bogged down into the politics of it all. Uh, but the point is, so much research is used on finding the next SSRI, right? Like, or the next SNRI, or the next antipsychotic, and so little on let's find the next opiate that has better tolerance profiles, that doesn't, make you severely addictive, that doesn't cause horrible withdrawals. And Conolidine is in that direction. You know, Conolidine is a very gentle. It's not an opiate because it doesn't actually activate the opiate receptors. It's more interesting than that. It's very gentle. What it does is it inhibits a peptide that is called ACKR3, which is a natural peptide that is inside you that scavenges endorphins. In other words, when you release kind of like endogenous opiates inside you, you know, when you feel happy, when you are hanging out in nature, etc., um, those get scavenged. In other words, they are removed by that peptide. And what this does, apparently, is it kind of prevents that from happening to some extent. It's not very powerful, so it's a little bit of a difference. Meaning that it's not like you're flooding your entire system with exogenous opiates. What's happening more is that you're kind of like boosting the endorphin tone in the regions where like you're already naturally releasing them, which is much better from a tolerance profile perspective, right? Because your body is not going to start adapting to this exogenous opiate influx. It's more kind of like, hey, like my natural opiates are a little bit higher. Maybe there's some degree of tolerance and adaptation, but it's mild. And anecdotally, people who take these every day for like a month and then stop taking it, very mild, if at all perceptible, withdrawal effects. And it does seem to help with mild pain for a lot of people. So, but above all, I think of it as kind of like a tonic, kind of like coffee. I don't take it every day. I reserve it for like special occasions, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. But today is a special occasion because I'm going to be talking about something pretty cool. And so I'm going to give it a go. I take it sublingually for better absorption, kind of like better bang for your buck. We'll see. It's very subtle. It's kind of like chamomile tea, honestly. It's not very perceptible, but it does do something. I think it does improve my mood a little bit. I'm also going to be having like a hardcore stimulant coffee throughout this video just to keep me going. This one is pretty strong. It's actually 225 milligrams, the whole can. I'm a coffee addict. Not proud of it. No, actually, I am a little bit proud of it because coffee is not bad for you, all things considered. However, you can tell I'm not going to be taking 5-MeO DMT today because I would not take this amount of caffeine on a day where I explore 5-MeO DMT. Okay, so the topic of the day is how to maximize your chances of a good 5-MeO DMT experience. The first thing that I will mention is I have a lot of experience with 5-MeO DMT. An important note is I have done it legally. When I've gone to Canada and Mexico, in those two countries, 5-MeO DMT is unscheduled. And I've done it in very safe settings, supervised by people. At first, it was with a standard facilitator, like shaman, so to speak. More kind of like, trusted, facilitator, not buying into their ontology or metaphysics or anything like that. But down the line, I explored it much more on my own, in retreat facilities, supervised. Like I always have, somebody way in the back, kind of like minding their own business, not playing, first person shooter video games or anything that would disturb the vibe. But, if they're reading poetry or just quietly meditating or something like that, just to make sure, that I'm not like choking or like I need a, medical assistance or whatever. But I just feel very, very honored, very grateful to reality and the universe and everything, the multiverse, for being in this lifetime and having had the honor to actually be able to explore this very deeply, because it is not only very profound, but I think it's very informative about the nature of consciousness. And I'm a Qualia nerd. I really want to understand reality, and I think exotic states of consciousness are a key window into kind of like understanding the general phenomenon. And 5-MeO DMT is one of the biggest pieces of information when it comes to understanding the state space of consciousness. It really is very serious business, and by now I have probably done it over 1,000 times. There's people who probably have done it more than me. Probably I know a facilitator who has, and I probably know like 2 or 3 people who have done it more and at higher doses more consistently, kind of like every day for 6 months, this sort of thing. That is rare. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend, it's not like I don't generally recommend 5-MeO. I don't go in the streets and say, hey, you should try 5-MeO DMT. But I don't recommend doing what I have done. I don't recommend, hey, you should have 1,000 plus 5-MeO DMT experiences, because it's very idiosyncratic. It may work very well for you, it might not. And I think, like, on average, for like most people, to be honest, it probably would mess with their epistemology quite a bit. They will not as severely as DMT, which I also have explored very deeply. Um, but it's kind of in that direction. I mean, it does make you believe weird things. Um, am I immune? No. But I do have quite a bit of mimetic resistance. And I will say why. And I think is because I'm a philosopher, because at the end of the day, my identity is not, wrapped under like, hey, I'm a spiritual person, or like um, I know the truth about reality, or kind of this macho, like, hey, I take so many psychedelics or anything like that. Like, not at all. Like, my identity is actually fairly thin. My sense of self also, that 5-MeO interacts with that. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, and more in a different video. But uh, I I perceive myself as a philosopher, right? Like, I perceive myself as like, hey, somebody who I genuinely want to understand the nature of reality, and I know that this is tricky, and I know that it's very easy to be deceived, and I have a lot of considerations about, hey, the experience that I have is a world simulation inside a nervous system, and if I experience an angel talking to me, I don't assume that it's real, even if it feels very real in the moment. And so I consider all of my experiences data, data that I go through and I analyze and synthesize, and I don't take any one experience too seriously. Um, and I think that's a very important protective factor. There's probably or also like personality factors, or like, mindfulness, meditation, um, loving kind. There's a bunch of things that I think are protective, and why I'm not completely delusional by now. uh, but yeah, I mean, compare with like Leo Gura. I mean, poor guy. I'm not against him or anything. I think he's quite a smart guy and honest, and probably quite candid and earnest. But I have probably taken equivalent amounts of 5-MeO DMT as he has, and I think I have turned out quite differently. I mean, he did not that did not seem to like affect him very well, to be honest, just judging from his, oh, my 30 days of daily 5-MeO experiment. It sounded like that was not affecting him good, right? So by any means, don't do what I have done, right? Like, I don't think it's necessary or helpful in particular. I'm just extremely intellectually curious about this, right? So like, it's kind of like a calling. It's like I want to understand it very deeply, but it's like, some people, you know it's kind of like the Schmidt sting index, right? Like, there's like a guy who like stung himself with like every possible wasp, like, and rated the pain. He's like, okay, bullet ant, it feels as bad as being shot, and like, he did it over and over so he could rate all the pains, right, and like describe them. It's like, yeah, because he's a sting pain nerd, right? Okay, similarly, I'm kind of like a hardcore psychedelic nerd in that sense, right? It's like um it's not optimized for, spiritual development. It's optimized for knowledge and understanding. And so again, don't do what I have done. That's I'm not trying to get more people to do that. Mm. However, I do think that if you are curious about 5-MeO, if you're curious about having a mystical experience, knowing what kind of like this profound sense of oneness and emptiness and union with the multiverse feels like, even also if you're curious about superintelligence, like conscious superintelligence, which 5-MeO DMT does give rise to, although only within a narrow window of dosage. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a different video. Uh, you know, it can be done safely. It can be done safely, and it can be very meaningful. And overwhelmingly, like the vast majority of people that I know who have done it in a sensible, reasonable way have been very grateful for it. I don't facilitate 5-MeO DMT. If I did, in the future, I would do it in a place like Mexico or Canada, and I would, really emphasize like maximizing the chances of a positive experience. And actually, I would craft a whole retreat based on what I'm going to talk about today. So but I don't facilitate, and I think it's a huge responsibility to do it properly. But from having been in 5-MeO retreats, from talking to people, from witnessing hundreds of people doing it, probably hundreds by now, at least 100 by now. Um, Overwhelmingly, most people are like, "I'm so glad I did this. I'm so happy I did this." And some people are like, that was interesting, and a few people are like, "Not for me. That was not for me, and I regret it." But it's rare. It really is rare. Um, Unless you kind of like take it very casually, without kind of like being serious about it, or having had a lot of experience beforehand. Okay, so I'm just going to explain. Some of this is obvious, some of this is less obvious. I think like what's more interesting is going to be my commentary around it. So the very first thing is, okay, tips for good and wholesome beneficial 5-MeO DMT experiences. So number one, and if there's only one thing that you remember, honestly it would be this one, is practice loving kindness daily, uh, for a while before the experience. um, this sounds like corny. It sounds like not that important. Honestly, a lot of people dismiss loving kindness as kind of like an introductory aspect of meditation. Like, oh, if you can't do hardcore meditation, do a little bit of loving kindness beforehand. No, 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 no. Very serious adept meditators, the Buddha, um, enlightened people that I know, or quote unquote enlightened people that I know, they will say like, hey, loving kindness can take you all the way. It is very powerful. It is really significant. It's a little by little you're feeling kind of your soul's, your soul layers, your soul sheaths. You're feeling them with love and care, and it adds up. Every effort counts. And if you're doing loving kindness every day, at least 10 minutes, it impacts every aspect of your life. Or like if you have a problem at work, if you have a problem with family, if you get hurt or injured, it's a lot easier to kind of like deal with that if you have been practicing consistently, because you can, you contextualize it and you dilute it with some love and care. Does it mean that you will, become this kind of like hyper agreeable, easy to take advantage of person? Not necessarily. I mean, maybe a little bit at first. Like if you have never done loving kindness and your fuel for motivation, so to speak, is is like, oh, I want to be the best. I want to have high status. I want to, crush my enemies. And you start doing a little bit of loving kindness, people may actually take advantage of you because you're kind of like lowering your guard, and you have probably crafted an environment where that guard is necessary. Um, However, it is something that you can like metacognitively control for and adapt. And so, in the long term, I actually think it makes you much more resilient, and it puts you in a different environment where, yeah, you're not going to be as likely to be taken advantage of. And honestly, I think that, leaders who do loving kindness in the long term just produce better outcomes, even if, in the very short term, they don't kind of like crush their enemies, they don't like win prizes and so on. It's like, well, but yeah, maybe that doesn't matter as much. Maybe what matters is that you're walking in the right direction and you're actually ensuring, covering all the bases, making things are properly done, and and you're more likely to actually arrive at something that is beneficial for everybody. So yeah, do not dismiss this. I mean, like it really is extremely powerful. So I recommend, 10 minutes a day at least, hopefully. You can listen some playlist on YouTube. um, at the very least, even just like sitting quietly, kind of like tuning into your body and seeing like, hey, may everybody I know, and everything inside me, may it be harmonized, may it be happy. I want it to be happy. I want it to be joyful. That is very good. It's very good for your soul, and it pays off big time on 5-MeO DMT. Like I swear, like this is not exaggeration. It makes a world of a difference. Okay, so second, also very obvious, maybe, is exercising, being fit. I mean, like doing 20 minutes of cardio every day for like a couple of weeks before 5-MeO experience will change the difference quite a bit. Like, if you're like overweight, like seriously overweight, and you haven't exercised in a long while, and you take 5-MeO DMT, I mean, it is like all of a sudden like doing a, kind of like high intensity interval training with no preparation, with no warm up. I mean, yeah, your arteries are clogged, and 5-MeO just kind of like releases these really power. It's kind of like, all the floodgates are down, and and that can cause really unpleasant kind of like patterns of stress and tension in your body that will really backfire. So I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, if you're gonna, run a marathon, not perfect, because yeah, that's more endurance than like, kind of like high intensity, like short. But like, yeah, if you're gonna do something really intense, it makes sense to kind of like precondition your body before that to kind of like know how to handle intense feelings. Um, so yeah, exercising, I would say especially cardio, but yeah, strength training, whatever it is, like highly, highly recommended. Also obvious is like eating healthy, the days preceding the experience. Personally, I would say like eat vegetarian or vegan if you can for karmic reasons. But that's, yeah, that's gonna be controversial, and like for some people, they might say, yeah, the health benefits of for them in particular of meat may overweight the ethical considerations and whatnot. So yeah, I wouldn't be like pushy about these. That said, if I were to ever kind of like start a retreat center in Mexico, for example, and offer 5-MeO, I would only offer vegetarian food, just because, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I like eating a pig who, suffered horribly in factory farming before like meeting God is like, it's just yucky. Like, but anyway, probably, probably not a big deal for most people. Okay, the next one is practicing equanimity. There's a bunch of ways of doing these, and a few considerations. First of all, I really do not like when people moralize equanimity, right? So let's say somebody's kind of like very wimpy. I used to be wimpy. I don't know, like several years ago, in some sense, right? It's kind of like, oh, if you hurt me or I burn. Well, not really. I've always had like some, inner core that is like strong, but externally though, kind of like this sense of like, oh, I'm resisting, or like, oh, I can't deal with this, kind of like that clinching kind of response to discomfort. um that is the opposite of what you want on 5-MeO. On 5-MeO, you want kind of a relaxation response to discomfort. um More so, 5-MeO in and of itself cultivates equanimity, I have found, for a very good reason, which is that even under the best preparations, like sometimes it's just physically uncomfortable or spiritually uncomfortable, actually. You go through like a process, 5-MeO, especially if you do it a lot. And there's very little that you can do. Like, honestly, like when you're experiencing physical discomfort on 5-MeO, resisting it, trying to make it go away, kind of like pushing it away, saying like, oh, no, not that, not that. None of that accelerates, it going away. Like literally the fastest, the kind of like the shortest path to removing that discomfort is to just not care about it, and just kind of like mindfully accept whatever is happening. And on 5-MeO DMT, that has happened to me just so many times that my body has just learned, okay, like that is actually the shortest path. There's no point in resisting. But if you've never done 5-MeO, you can still get a little bit of a feel for these by, for example, eating very spicy food. The spiciness in your mouth is like, yeah, sure, you can, drink some milk, you can, eat some menthol or something. But what I have heard from people who eat a lot of spicy food is like that usually doesn't, like, it doesn't change the arc Like, yeah, you may get a little bit of a micro relief, but like the overall arc of the pain is kind of the same. So like actually just kind of, sitting with it and like mindfully is like, okay, yeah, this is uncomfortable or it's very uncomfortable, but it's fading. It's fading slowly, but it is fading, and you just kind of like accept it. That is what's helpful, actually. And there's like other things that you can do to cultivate equanimity, pretty straightforward, such as cold showers, where the whole point is not the cold shower the point, but the point is that you practice not resisting it. You practice like, okay, I'm not gonna respond to it. I'm not gonna clinch around it. I'm just gonna let it happen. It's like, yeah, this is uncomfortable, but so what? That is an excellent attitude for 5-MeO DMT. So just accept whatever happens and try to not resist. But I would not moralize this. And the reason I'm not going to moralize this is because a lot of this is subconscious, right? And changing your subconscious attitude takes time. It really just takes time. Mm. It's not something that happens from one day to another. So, like in the shower example, or a cold plunge, for example, or enduring a very hot sauna, it's something that you build over time, right? It's like you slowly every day are able to condition your subconscious to accept it a little bit better. And so that is the way. That is the way. Um, do not tell somebody who's resisting, like, hey, or hint at that they're wimpy or they're bad because they're resisting or they're weak, because that just doesn't help. Like, you just have to understand, like, hey, this is a long subconscious process. And honestly, I think, like, if you've never practiced any equanimity, or you don't think of it as a concept, um, or a direction, it honestly takes kind of like a month of kind of like start to think in those terms of like, hey, don't resist what is uncomfortable, um, to actually kind of like for that to seep into your subconscious. Okay, so next one is exposure to Rob Burbea. I'm a big fan of Rob Burbea. Um, he has this amazing book. I mean, this book is actually, in some sense, is very technical, takes a long while to read properly. Uh, but it's great. I mean, reading a few chapters of these before a 5-MeO experience is definitely going to help. Um, I would say, though, that listening to his lectures is probably even better, because you also get a little bit of his vibe, and his vibe is just very nice. I mean, like, he's very well put together, and yeah, I mean, listen to some lecture about letting go, or loving kindness, or fear, how to deal with fear. Um, Honestly, anything like that, or meditation on the energy body, soul making. Listening to Rob Burbea the days preceding a 5-MeO experience will have a big impact, is my guess. And I bet you could probably run a clinical trial on this, and and it would actually have a significant effect. So highly recommended. The next one is, positive intention for the trip. And of course, this is going to be very personal. It's like, what is it that you're trying to get out of the 5-MeO experience? And I would say there's like some wrong answers, right? Like, if the reason you're taking 5-MeO is to kind of like impress others, or to kind of like tick the box of like, oh, I have tried all psychedelics, including 5-MeO, it's not really appropriate. It's not really going to be conducive to like a positive, helpful, wholesome experience. I think, if you're doing it with an intention, such as, hey, I'm doing this for science, I want to understand consciousness and reality, and I'm serious about it, and I'm going to write a report, I'm going to make a video about it, something like that. I think that's good. Setting that intention and being clear about it is going to be very helpful. Um, but also something like, hey, if you feel like, oh, I feel disconnected from God, or I feel disconnected from like the big picture, and I want to meet or understand higher realities, that's also a perfectly valid reason. The best reason, honestly, I think, is something like, hey, I want to learn something for the benefit of all beings. If you go in sincerely with that intention, something beautiful is much more likely to manifest. And I say this with very seriously. I don't think this is hyperbole. Okay, the next one is doing breath work. Try a playlist of like Wim Hof or Tummo. 10 minutes of breath work really pays off. Like, this is not a mild thing either. So if you do breath work, especially if you can manage to kind of like get to the point where you feel like the internal stress bubbling up to the surface and kind of like unraveling a little bit. Um, a warmth, kind of like a sense of warmth in your body, and especially the most homogeneous, kind of like strobing, global, you know, you don't want kind of like just like little patches of warmth that are kind of like asymmetrical. So like ideally something that, okay, it kind of like warms you up in a homogeneous way. That is very, very helpful because, 5-MeO DMT does that already. Like actually low doses of 5-MeO phenomenologically have significant overlap with something like Wim Hof breathing. Actually, there's like significant overlap. And also with like the phenomenology of something like nitrous oxide, which is, yeah, kind of like a very embodied feeling, and a little bit like anesthetic. Um, you want it to be kind of like as homogeneous as possible, because if it's kind of very broken or kind of like stressed in some regions but not others, the 5-MeO energy may actually break symmetry, and that may cause kind of an unpleasant experience. So just make sure, try to aim towards, use your attention and awareness to spread around kind of this like sense of relaxation and sense of ease and warmth. Okay, the next one is yeah, something like praying. I am broadly speaking kind of like secular Buddhist in approach. Um, but like if you have like a tulpa, if you believe in God, if you believe in spiritual entities, which I'm open to, I'm not saying they're not real. I'm just saying that for me is difficult to take seriously personally. Just that's a personal thing. Um, and I don't think less of people who take like spiritual beings seriously. Honestly, I really don't. Praying to them actually I think can be quite helpful, especially again if it's charged with loving kindness, if it's charged with like positive intention, not non-selfishness or greed or fear. um you know some deities, some spiritual beings are kind of like fear-based. I don't recommend praying to those. Yeah, so be discerning, but yeah, praying is good. I think praying is good. Exposure to nature and walking barefoot, ideally for a 5-MeO retreat, you want to do it in a natural place, um, safe, with grass that you can walk, and kind of like spend some time, very hippie sounding, but yeah, kind of like discharging your negative or positive ions, or whatever kind of like hippie-ish construct you want. Honestly, that that works. It does something from personal experience. So yeah, walking barefoot in nature, let's say in the morning, before your 5-MeO experience, will help. It will be grounding. I recommend it. Next is like, yeah, like singing, especially with kind of like releasing the sense that you could be doing wrong. Of course, if you're a professional singer, you treat your voice with a lot of seriousness. Finely tuning may be quite important, or like kind of serious spiritual practice. Yes, do it right. But for the average person, I think it's more important kind of like the sense of disinhibition. That hey, like you're just kind of letting go. You don't care what other people think of you or how they're perceiving you. You're just kind of like joining the flow of nature. Yes, yes, all of that is great. That approach is very good. Next one is gratitude. Send a donation to a charity, or a thank you note to a friend or family member before 5-MeO or the day before. Especially if you never do something like this, or if it's very rare, like it makes a big difference. Feeling that you're kind of giving back to the flow of life. Yeah, it matters. It matters. Okay, less obviously, um, activating to the point of euphoria any of the chakras and then directing the energy to it during the come up. So yeah, if you're familiar with kind of like chakra meditation, or you do like Tummo breath work, focusing on your chakras, that is very aligned with the 5-MeO experience, even more so than with other psychedelics, I would say. And especially the crown chakra and the heart chakra. Those are, from experience, personally, very 5-MeO DMT kind of like. The crown chakra in particular, I mean, like, I guess people say like, maybe the sixth chakra is kind of like for, psychic abilities or psionics or whatever it may be. Whereas the crown chakra is kind of your connection with the ultimate, the transcendent. I don't know, how to make sense of that in some ways. Well, actually, I do have some theories having to do with the harmonics of your field of awareness. Because yeah, when you stimulate this region, you're kind of like stimulating the global mode. It's kind of like you're stimulating the whole thing all at once rather than like partitioning it into some of the subharmonics. But whatever, you don't have to believe in my theory. You don't have to think of it from that perspective. If you believe that, yeah, the crown chakra is your connection to the absolute or to the divine, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Because it pragmatically actually works. Like being able to focus there very well, focus very well on your heart chakra, and activating them before 5-MeO. Great idea, because then it's sort of like you're gonna open the floodgates, right? So like you want the main channels, you want like the large kind of like regions that can carry a lot of water to be as wide open as possible. So you reduce like turbulence, dissonance, friction, viscosity. So yeah, uh, activating your chakras. YouTube hippie meditations, hippiesm. Yes, good. Go for it. Listen to like a 20-minute activate your chakras meditation. Awesome. Awesome. Go for it. Okay. Spending some time visualizing high harmony geometric shapes or playing with them, like these sort of things. Yeah, I don't know what they mean spiritually. I'm skeptical that there's kind of like an inherent meaning to them. But I do think they tune into, pleasant, consonant, resonant modes of your field of consciousness. And so, for example, like spending like 5 minutes looking at a beautiful hexagon like this before 5-MeO, um, great. Or even kind of like heart shapes, like symbols that are meaningful to you, that are harmonizing, like the symbol of infinity or the endless knot. All of that is great, 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 great. I recommend against things that are symmetrically uneven or chiral. So, for example, I wouldn't meditate on this, actually. This is beautiful. This is cool. But this is more of a DMT type of thing, not 5-MeO. 5-MeO tends to be much more balanced. It's more about the global mode. It's about like integrating everything together and synchronizing everything. It's not chiral things. They're not very good on 5-MeO. A dodecahedra. Yes, honestly, like spend 5 minutes meditating on a dodecahedra if that is the sort of thing that vibes well with you, and go for it. I should mention, and all of these are like additive in some sense. Again, like the most important is loving kindness of all of these things. Well, and of course, like be very careful about combining it with drugs that do not go with it. Research online very carefully. If any medication that you're taking is contraindicated with 5-MeO, please be careful and sensible there. But taking care of the basics, loving kindness is the most important. So but they're additive. Ideally you spend a couple days or a week kind of like using all of these helpful tips to kind of like build momentum for like the most beneficial experience possible. Okay, so next one is listening to music you find to be sacred or spiritual. Especially like right before the experience, I do recommend, again, it's going to be very idiosyncratic, for some people, it's like, oh, only classical, Indian meditation music only, for somebody else, it's like, yo, like Enya. I love Enya. I love, what is it, like Caribbean blue or uh, sail away, sail away. I don't know, like this classic Enya songs, 90s environmentalist vibes. Awesome, awesome. If they vibe well with you, go for it. The most important is joy. That the music is joyful, spiritual, calming, relaxing, grounding. That is very helpful for the vibe of 5-MeO. Okay, the next one is reading mystical or philosophical literature that vibes well with you. And, this is going to be very idiosyncratic as well. Like, I don't recommend, in a retreat center for like, if the facilitator is like, okay, everybody has to read this, ancient Indian, philosophy text before the experience. It's like, no, that is brainwashing. Like, don't, like, it has to be something that you already kind of vibe with. It's something that your whole system, your sub-agents are okay with, something they use for coordination, something that your sub-agents are like, yes, I can go with that and can use it for kind of like aligning the system. Great. One that I recommend is this, quite generic, because everybody can benefit from this, and um, there's nothing really controversial or kind of politicizable or like idiosyncratic here. Like, this is very generically helpful and secular. You don't have to believe in anything to kind of like get value from this book. So reading a couple chapters the morning before a session, uh, very helpful, very helpful. Highly recommend. But anything like Alan Watts, for example, for some people is like their go-to philosopher. So yeah, sure, like read, what is it called? Joyous Cosmology. Beautiful book. I read it many years ago, and even though it's not very philosophically rigorous, like, hey, it's very beautiful. Yes, go for it. The point is, it has to be something that vibes well with you. Very personal, very personal. Next one is pleasant scents. Again, here's where it's personal, because I believe it's not about, hey, nature intended for this particular scent, it has to be this way. It's like, no, what works is what works well with your subconscious processing, right? So like, if you grew up in a 90s environmentalist hippie family, and they hated synthetic things, and they were anti-capitalists and whatever, if you have that programming in you, then yeah, probably, putting on Le Mail by Jean Paul Gaultier before 5-MeO, you will think like, oh, I mean, this is toxins, I'm full of toxins. Okay, maybe I'm making a little bit of fun of that. I don't believe it, right? I don't believe it personally. But the thing is that if your subconscious is uncomfortable with that scent, it might become a problem. You may feel trapped, or kind of like, like this is not good. Uh, Whereas, I don't know, maybe smelling some hyssop. This is a very interesting scent. Very beautiful, actually. Too amphoraceous for me, but like, whatever. You know, or sage. Sage is very common for some reason. Yeah, it works. Like, to spread a little bit of sage. From a micromorts maximalist perspective, is not ideal, because any smoke is just bad for you, and like, whatever. It's gonna irritate your cardiovascular system. Is not ideal, but every once in a while, let's not be neurotic. It's fine. It's fine to use a little to sage, to be saged before a 5-MeO experience is gonna be fine. I don't recommend, like, for example, doing 5-MeO like right next to a campfire, or spending like a whole evening, next to a campfire or like a fireplace, because then the PM 2.5 particles do build up in your system. They do irritate your cardiovascular system. It's just, you're not going to be as consonant inside. That's, your cardiovascular system is actually quite sensitive to those things. So even though it has like the nature vibe, I personally wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, being sage is fine. But again, like, this is very idiosyncratic. Like, this is kind of a synthetic smelling perfume in some ways, but I like it a lot. I find it very grounding and very beautiful. Or this one, for example, um, Moschino. I'll put a little bit on the other side. Mm. This is beautiful. A very beautiful white floral sweet composition. Then again, if your subconscious disagrees with this, then don't do it. Use a different scent. The important thing is that it feels holistically good. Okay, the next one is petting and spending time with a happy dog for a little while. There is a big freaking caveat here, which is, do not take 5-MeO DMT with the dog there. I have been in a ceremony where somebody insisted on having their dog with them during the experience. It was a disaster. I mean, nothing terrible happened, but it was so freaking stressful. I was not supposed to be a facilitator of that ceremony, but the dog was so neurotic. barking and freaking out where the other person was on 5-MeO, like rolling on the floor and screaming, and the dog thought we were trying to kill the owner, and like it's just like fuck no, just no. Okay, don't do that. Don't. Uh, anyway, nothing against that person or the dog. I actually deeply deeply like them, but it's just not a good combination. Very important to distinguish, hey, you were spending time with a nice, relaxed, pleasant dog a few hours before the experience versus you were having the dog during the ceremony. Don't do that. No pets. No pets in the ceremony, okay? A hard no, at least in my case. No pets. No pets. Okay, but pets before? Yes. Yes. Calming, nice, petting, happy, golden retriever, awesome. Okay, moving on. Um, Going to an inspiring museum a few hours before the experience. Actually, this is even better for something like LSD or something that is going to be like kind of like very conceptual, and a conceptual art museum. If you're high in openness to experience and you like that sort of thing, wonderful. But also 5-MeO. I mean, like the sense that that life is not all about kind of like struggling and survival and like zero sum competition, and like no, there is also the ability to kind of like produce beautiful things, conceptually interesting things, stimulating things, and that we evaluate as a society. Even that is very good priming, honestly, because it kind of tells your subconscious, hey, you can relax. There's more to life than the rat race. That's good. Um, ceremonial aspects. This is a double-edged sword. I would say maybe like 70 to 80% of 5-MeO facilitators are like net good. And then like a solid like 20 to 30% of facilitators are like net bad. Um, because they have idiosyncratic beliefs and practices. And, there's a couple Mexican facilitators, I'm Mexican, not absolutely nothing against Mexicans, but there's like two very famous, apparently pretty terrible 5-MeO facilitators. One of them in particular, uh, by the name of Octavio, who like he's just famous for being a bad 5-MeO facilitator because like he asks people to do it while standing, and he's an idiot. He's a moron. He's an imbecile. Like he thinks to benefit from 5-MeO DMT, you have to be standing and looking at the sun. Like what a moron, imbecile. I'm sorry, but like no, because like the vast majority of people actually want to lay down or like sit down on in such an intense experience, and then on top of that, he's a mother because he electrocutes you, or he like slaps you in the face if you don't follow his advice, and he asks you to sign a contract that says like, yeah, you will follow his advice even on 5-MeO DMT. Is like no, you can't consent to that. You can't. You're a different entity while you're on 5-MeO DMT. You cannot consent to something like that. So anyway, do not recommend, like really do your homework and research your facilitator before you do it with them, and make sure you get referrals, and you've talked to people who have done it with them, and they are very transparent about their process. All of that is very important. If they are good, they're good vibes, they give you a lot of space, they're spiritually neutral, they're not trying to brainwash you, a ceremonial component can be very grounding, can be very helpful. But do your own research, please. Very important. Okay, next one. Less conventional aspects, and kind of cultish. So the next one, this we're getting to kind of the strange, maybe controversial advice. I don't think anything I've said before is really controversial. So, mm, watching 4D rotation lattices while coming up. So, QRI actually has a tool, which is the 4D wave visualizer, which is a fantastic linear algebra tool, link in the description, that you can use to kind of like visualize beautiful 4-dimensional rotations. And I've actually personally experienced this many times on 5-MeO, like looking at this while coming up on 5-MeO. Wow, this is so beautiful. The part of the instruction would be something like, hey, tell your visual system, this is not 3D, this is not a screen. Try to tune into actually a four-dimensional object that is rotating in four dimensions. And if you do it with a lot of intentions and with a desire of like understanding and learning something from these, sometimes you can actually tune into a four-dimensional rotation, and it's not hyperbole. Actually, it's something like you get kind of like the tracer effect becomes like very harmonized, and you can use kind of the tracers as like another source of geometric dimensionality, and the object is rotating across that. um, it actually feels like if you can tune into the four-dimensional rotation, it almost feels like a interdimensional multiverse antenna, and I still don't know how to make sense of that, but there's something really true and profound about that. um, I don't know, I don't understand it, but yeah, I mean, like if you're already kind of experienced with 5-meo and you want to check out something really exotic and fascinating, that is I would say worth it. And if you do it, please let me know. I mean, I'm curious how other people react to it. The next one is, yeah, like playing with coupling kernels, resonance systems, harmonic superpositions, some of the stuff that we have published at QRI. In particular, our paper on meditative cessations has a bunch of code and browser applications that you can use to kind of like play around with things. Um, that interacts really strongly with the state in a very beneficial way. It actually kind of like massages away the internal discrepancies and dissonances and subagents that don't want to integrate. And my guess is that long term, high end psychedelic therapy with best clinical outcomes will probably use tools like that. Is my guess. I'm not super confident, but yeah, if I were to bet, I would bet on that. Okay, next one. Um, Playing a musical instrument before. If you know how to play the flute or the piano, the guitar, that I think that releases some like very good kind of like energy. This inhibits you. Not if it stresses you out. If you have like ego issues around it, that's not gonna be very helpful. But like, yeah, if you feel that you're pretty good, you're fluid with it, I think actually it's very beneficial because it does something to kind of like the feedback loop of harmonization. It gives you kind of like a template for self-organizing into a more harmonious configuration. So yes, great. Next one, being horny, which is actually very similar. It's essentially like a highly activated second chakra. Yeah, I mean, I'm just very mindful of kind of like the sex cult attractor. So like, I would not recommend these in a retreat if I were to kind of organize one um, for people who like want to experience 5-MeO for the first time, or really ever. I mean, this is just something that I have personally experienced. Um, and it's good. I mean, here's the thing. The reason it's good is because activating your first and second chakras causes this kind of like weird kind of like sense of like tension that wants to be released that is very pleasant. And if you can focus on it while you're coming up on 5-MeO DMT, I mean, to begin with, like that pleasant feeling already is kind of like creating a cushioning, is already providing kind of like a background of joy. Yeah, right. I mean, sex is joyful, being horny is pretty joyful. So like, yeah, that's just what it is. And especially if there's no shame associated to it. If there's shame associated with it, yeah, maybe probably not. But yeah, if you're comfortable with your own sexuality, like yes, um, what happens is that if you can focus on that while you're coming up on 5-MeO, is going to be very similar to being able to focus on the heart chakra or the crown chakra, which is just this very powerful source of consonance that generates a specific kind of like flavor of tension that then 5-MeO DMT really releases in a really powerful way. Um, so yeah, I mean, like from a kind of like strictly hedonic, physiological perspective, my guess is that by far the most powerful orgasm that you could possibly experience in your life would be combining 5-MeO DMT while being horny. Well, don't quote me on these. I know it's probably controversial, but yeah, hey, I'm a truth seeker. This is true as far as I can tell. Next one is, yeah, coming down from a jhana. So if you do jhana meditation, similar to kind of like breathwork, loving kindness, just like something that anneals your system before, super good. highly recommended. Like going into 5-MeO with kind of like already like, okay, you already kind of like build up and then released a bunch of tension. Very, very, very good. I highly recommend that. Next one, this is more about joy, right? Like, I mean, I was saying like how important it is for music to be spiritual and so on and so forth. But like, really, what matters is kind of like lowering like shame and guilt, legitimately, not tricking yourself, right? Like, but kind of like being able to tune into a sense of joy and comfort and love and care and meta, and if like a pop music, if K-pop or honestly whatever it is that makes you happy. I put in Twitter kind of like, even if it's Britney Spears or Justin Bieber, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it makes you feel joyful. Um, there are like some like progressive rock music that I enjoy, like Dream Theater, for example. It doesn't sound very spiritual. It has like even some harshness to it, but it reminds me of when I was a teenager, and like and some of those songs make me feel legitimately a lot of joy, and some of those have very beautiful music videos. And watching that on 5-MeO is a trip. It really is a trip, and very synergistic in a good way. Then again, what matters is joy. That this is tuning into joy and awe, and then go for it. Um, Next one is, yeah, getting a massage from your partner, probably also getting a professional massage, but like there's something about kind of the intimacy of a lover that yeah, all those endorphins and oxytocin when somebody like massages you all around, touches you all around, that you trust and love. Doing that before 5-MeO again is going to prepare you and settle you down. Very great combination. Okay, the next one, this is going to be controversial. I don't care. The problem though is it might be dangerous if overdone. But honestly, I suspect that like in the long term, if people suffer from anxiety, depression, etc., this is probably the way to go to minimize the chances of a very unpleasant trip, which is combining with small amounts of phenibut, gabapentin, or pregabalin. I would also actually add beta blockers. Beta blockers also perfect. Like let's say like a extended release 40 milligrams or 80 milligrams propanolol pill taken in the morning of 5-MeO, or 500 milligrams of phenibut, which is not that much. But if you have no tolerance and you only take it every once in a while, which is the only way I would ever suggest taking those substances, it's gonna be a lot easier to let go and feel very comfortable on the state. It really helps a lot, and I don't know why people don't do it more, because it really is a very big difference. In Mexico, it's some of these are available over the counter. You can actually get like pregabalin or gabapentin in Mexico. You just go to a pharmacy, whatever. Allegedly, from anecdotes, this actually helps a lot. But be very mindful about, like, it has to be low dose. Don't do high dose. It probably makes this a little bit more physiologically dangerous because of like respiratory, suppression. Um, if you take, phenibut and then 5-MeO, absolutely make sure there's somebody watching you over. That's like absolutely essential. Um, and so on. I would not combine it with, for example, GHB or alcohol, um, because, well, it should be obvious, right? But like chances of vomiting go way up with those substances. And I'm pretty sure that people, is the number one way people die with 5-MeO is like they consume it while drunk and then they vomit and then they drown in their own vomit. It's a known danger, so just don't do that. Okay, next one is combining with an already euphoric psychedelic trip like LSD, 2CB, psilocybin. Um, like something that legally, in a ceremony I have experienced in Mexico, was a very, very nice mushroom trip. Again, in a fully legal environment, and then combining 5-MeO. But the trip was already very good. Like I was already like very, very, very happy and joyful, laughing and, and kind of like feeling so relieved and oh. And then the 5-MeO is like, wow, okay, that combination was incredible. But I have to be very clear. I think that only works when the trip is already fantastic, right? Like I do not don't combine with, like, if you're having a bad trip, I don't think it's gonna help taking 5-MeO. Like I think it's just gonna make it worse. So super big caveat there. The next one is, yeah, this is anecdotally. I know one facilitator that always does this, which is like combining with low dose ketamine. Now, this is a double-edged sword. Why? Because um, I mean, ketamine and dissociatives in general. I should mention, don't combine with DXM. In particular, DXM is extremely highly advised against combining with 5-MeO DMT, especially high doses. I mean, I suspect it's probably physiologically okay to take like 15 milligrams of DXM and then like a small dose of 5-MeO. There's probably no problem. But if you took like 400 milligrams of DXM and you're like in the dextroverse and you're completely dissociated, you may die. Like it's not a joke. It's not good to combine with 5-MeO. They're reported as extremely bad combination. Um, but ketamine is a different story because it's pharmacologically quite different, even though the primary kind of like dissociative mechanism of action, which is NMDA antagonism, is shared. Um, Low dose ketamine relaxes you, reduces fear and anxiety. Honestly, I suspect that like gabapentin or like pregabalin or beta blockers are probably just better. And the reason is that, the viscosity, the phenomenal viscosity of ketamine, makes it so that the waves of 5-MeO kind of like will travel with more resistance and will kind of like overheat the field of consciousness. I mean, we don't understand how this works, but that's as best as I can describe it. Um, and so it's sort of like the 5-MeO will have to overcome a little bit of kind of like junk, a little bit of like viscosity or like molasses in your field of experience. And I just don't think that's ideal. And personally, I think like 5-MeO, like its value proposition is like finely tuned, phase and frequency and resonances. And it's kind of like the whole point is to do really fine tuning, right? And ketamine will kind of like, will scramble the phases a little bit. And like, so I'm not so sure about it. However, for a lot of people, actually, it's net benefit because fear and anxiety are just such a downer when combined with 5-MeO. Like if you're really afraid and you take 5-MeO and like what gets energized is the fear, you may have like a really horrible panic-like experience. Especially if you don't have the equanimity to kind of like deal with it. It can be really, really horrible. Or fear of death or fear of ego annihilation. All of those things come up in medium to high doses. And yeah, probably a little bit of ketamine probably might significantly reduce the chances of that. But again, caveat: I think like ideally take it without anything. Ideally, following all of the other advice and having an overall kind of like healthy lifestyle will make it so that you don't need any help. You can just take 5-MeO and have a good experience. Okay, now things that absolutely do not help. You know, being stressed out, like issues with the job and family, reputation. You're having like arguments on Twitter that are very stressful. Somebody, you're going through a divorce, stuff like that. Like I would say, 5-MeO is like powerful enough, important enough, core enough, um, a once in a lifetime like experience enough that like, yeah, no, take it seriously. Don't try to sneak in a 5-MeO experience in the middle of like very stressful interactions with your boss, or like you're asking for a raise and they don't want it to give you whatever. Like I would separate that. I would say like, okay, that's, the world of the mundane. Take care of that. Find a good spot in your life, or at least take a vacation, or do it in a meditation retreat at a time where like these things are not top of your mind, because that will come up to the surface, right? Like if you're in the middle of a divorce, the 5-MeO experience will be about your divorce, at least up to like medium doses. If you take a high dose and you experience a breakthrough, it's gonna turn into something else. But all doses of 5-MeO are interesting and worthwhile. So yeah, I just don't think it's a good use of an experience. Save it for a better time. Other one is like caffeine and stimulants, right? I mean, I don't know why anybody would think it's a good idea, but You can find online. I personally know somebody who had a pretty traumatic, unpleasant experience by combining it with modafinil, and it wasn't a lot of modafinil. I think that person took 50 milligrams in the morning, which is like more of a kind of like a wake you up rather than a steamy, stimulant, like, hey, let's go type of dose. And it just interacted very bad with 5-MeO and just very extreme tension. And like the tension just didn't go away even after the experience for a while. So like no reason to do that. If you're a caffeine addict like myself, I drink like 400 milligrams of caffeine every day on average, more or less, sometimes less, sometimes more. I'm habituated to it, right? So when I've done 5-MeO, it's not like I can just cut caffeine because I might get some headache. It's mild, whatever. I've done it in the past. It's not a big deal. But uh, I would just like switch to, let's say, like white tea or green tea, right? Like, and save the coffee for after the experience. Like, there's no reason to kind of like, I have to have my morning coffee every time. Like no, no, no. Chill out a little bit. Have a green tea, like half as much caffeine. Uh, you will feel more relaxed than normal because you're a little bit less stimulated, and that's fine. I just do not recommend like downing a Red Bull and then taking 5-MeO because it's just gonna make you so tense. It's just like so unpleasant. Like, why would you do that? It's just distracting, maybe physiologically dangerous. Like, just don't. Um, and for sure, I mean, I don't know reports from these, but like amphetamines, cocaine, MDMA. Well, MDMA, some people combine successfully with 5-MeO, but they also report like palpitations and like I bet it's like physiologically stressful. I would just like skip that risk. I don't know why. Like, I mean, actually, MDMA and 5-MeO, some people have reported is like extremely good, but I think there's better ways of reducing that fear. And if what you need or want is kind of some of the empathogenic components, I would just take like low dose 2CB plus something like gabapentin. And probably that is like physiologically a lot less of a problem than MDMA. So yeah, just as a word of caution, having a fight or stressful interactions with someone, again, very activated kind of like fight or flight response, doesn't combine well with 5-MeO. Dealing with intense feelings of guilt and shame. I mean, of course, there's a caveat here. If in the long term, you have like serious depression, anxiety, constantly feeling guilty, shameful, and then you go for a 5-MeO experience with a lot of preparation, it may actually help. You may actually have like a taste of like, wow, I am part of the divine. I am part of something larger, and like really that might help you a lot. Um, but probably the experience itself, especially the come up and like up to the middle point, is gonna be unpleasant. And I just know enough people who've had like really unpleasant kind of like early stages of a trip because of kind of like a subconscious guilt and shame. That, by the way, is why loving kindness is so important, because doing loving kindness meditation, even if you realize you're not perfect, you're deficient, you don't work as well as you should or could, you don't hate yourself for it. And that makes a world of a difference. Reducing the habit of judgment makes a big difference. Like, you don't want to like amplify the judgment feeling on 5-MeO because it's just like traumatizing. There's no reason to do that. There really isn't. Physical pain. There's some caveats here. I have heard anecdotes. I've talked to people who have chronic pain who reported that 5-MeO DMT actually lessened it. However, 5-MeO DMT and severe pain do not combine, and the 5-MeO may actually kind of like amplify that discomfort in the moment. There's also a very big caveat here, which is that I talk a lot about like how DMT can be helpful for cluster headaches and migraines and hemicrania continua. And I recommend, if you have like those conditions, I recommend like checking out the Eleosina retreat, which is in Mexico in Valle de Bravo. And I love the people there. Actually, hey, they use this this is a pamphlet from them, like kind of to learn the basics. And they talk about qualia, qualia and exotic qualia, and they are fans of QRI. Actually, we have like an interview with the founder. Okay, I'm being promotional here, but like honestly, they're super wholesome because they use the psychedelics to treat severe chronic pain conditions with a very big success rate. They also, also people go for spiritual reasons and to, just explore consciousness, and that's perfectly valid as well. They have like cohorts specifically for that. Great. Um, but here's the very big caveat. 5-MeO DMT doesn't work as well for like migraines and cluster headaches. That is DMT. Okay. Important to remember because I know of anecdotes of people using 5-MeO to try to abort a cluster headache and it not working. But then the time expansion effect of 5-MeO made it worse. So you can actually multiply the pain and suffering if you combine it with 5-MeO. So 5-MeO and pain, not that strong of a connection there. DMT and severe migraine or cluster headaches, big connection. Different substances, different applications. 5-MeO, DMT, and existential pain, yes, big connection. Physical pain, not so much. Okay, moving on. Combining with salvia, you may think like, has anybody done that? The answer is yes. I haven't personally, but talking to people who have, they don't recommend it. Um, yeah. I don't know what to say about it because I'm sure, I mean, the experience must be so outlandish and impossible to describe. But the main point is that it's unpleasant. So like don't do it. I don't see the point. Uh Next one, combining with high dose ketamine. Also no, because the ketamine adds so much viscosity to your field of consciousness, and 5-MeO will just kind of like try to blast through that like viscosity. It just, the mixture is just not it's not good qualia chemistry, honestly. Like just skip it. Next one is, yeah, taking while experiencing a dysphoric psychedelic trip. I just don't think it is going to combine very well. Combining with nicotine or nootropics. uh, I think like nicotine, I have been nicotine addict in the past, like when I was like 18 to 20 years old. Um, I know what kind of like a nicotine habit feels like. Uh, I think taking nicotine every once in a while, like, chewing nicotine gum every 2 weeks or something for like writing or something, that's fine. That's great. But like daily, constant nicotine just kind of like puts you kind of like in overdrive, like tense, stress. Uh, does something to your energy body that isn't just very meditative or good. Um, Makes you more reactive. Mm, when I've taken nicotine like before 5-MeO, let's say like a patch, we don't know what is it called, like a pouch, yeah, not a patch, but a pouch, a nicotine pouch. Uh, it just feels like there's kind of like a shell of stress in my body, and 5-MeO is trying to melt it. And I spend like, a third of the trip kind of like melting that shell before I get into the good part. Just like skip it, like don't take nicotine for a week before 5-MeO, and you won't have to deal with that kind of like discomfort in the process. And nootropics, I mean, piracetam, pramiracetam, aniracetam, things of that nature. And yeah, they don't combine well with 5-MeO. It's just like stressful. The energy goes through a different channel. Is weird. Yeah, skip it. Next one is like city sounds. It should be obvious, but like, yeah, I don't know. You have to say things that are obvious sometimes. Yeah, like don't do it in the middle of a busy street, or like, yeah, if there's the risk that somebody might start a car. It's like, no, just, if you do it in the country, in a nice kind of like retreat environment, just make sure that people know that you're doing it so that they don't start drilling, next door, or like do construction work. Those sounds, they just feel very strong on the body, and they're just not natural. Your body is not meant to deal with them. So optimize, a little river, birds, that's great. Natural sounds, we're built for that. That's good. City sounds, no. Pollution, also no. Toxic personalities around you. The problem is that, even in spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual circles, in retreats, Sometimes there are toxic personalities, people who don't know, you know, they might be narcissistic or borderline, or they have like toxic traits and they might not even know it. And that is just doesn't vibe well with the state at all. Like if you have like somebody who has like serious narcissism right next to you, you know, entitled, or they believe that they are the next reincarnation of Jesus Christ, or that they know the secrets of the universe, and actually they don't, that is going to seep into you in a unpleasant way. So honestly, yeah, like find a circle of people that are like actually, you know, very self-aware. Ideally they don't, if they have a personality disorder, ideally they have been working around it and they know, you know, they're self-aware. That is important. But ideally, yeah, they're just chill people. That is the best environment. Sleep deprivation, obviously, right? Like, or stimulant crashes, right? Like if you've been taking Adderall for the last month, you know, for university or whatever, take a break, right? Like wait a couple weeks or a month before you take 5-MeO. Because those things deplete you, right? Like sleep deprivation, stimulants, they deplete you. And if you take 5-MeO, you're gonna feel depleted. Like I don't know how to explain it, but like, you know, that serotonin or like that dopamine that is inside you, on 5-MeO, you want it. You really want it. You don't want to feel like you're in a stimulant crash on 5-MeO. Like, don't do that. Eating junk food, I mean, moderation is key, but like, yeah, don't binge eat chocolates and potato chips and stuff before a trip or near it. I mean, there's something maybe esoteric around it, but like, I suspect, I don't know. My most crackpot idea here is that like the fat molecules of trans fats lodged in your body, especially if you ate them recently, they produce like dissonant, you know, microtubular resonances or something. Yeah, eat healthy before. Uh, Being in a haunted house. Okay, well, there's like some caveats. I think it probably depends on just whether you believe in these or not to some extent. But there's something about architecture, like you know, Christopher Alexander, a Kiori perspective, or Stephen Lehar. All of these perspectives kind of like care about like the symmetry and coherence. You know, sacred architecture. You know, a Hindu temple, Buddhist temple, a Christian temple, even a mosque. You know, things are like very beautifully arranged with the harmonics aligned. The thing is that, you know, on a psychedelic trip and like the nonlinear optics that they entail, in your world simulation, all of those walls will be essentially emitting waves, and you want the waves to meet in coherent waves and bounce back and produce very beautiful harmonic cymatics. If you're in one of these like modernist kind of like very weirdly put dissonant places, the waves are gonna be like clashing in uncomfortable ways, and you're gonna be embodying that, right? So just make sure the architecture is beautiful, or at the very least conventional and standard. Okay, finally, uh yeah, someone around who is out of tune with what you're doing. I mean, as I was saying, always have a sitter for 5-MeO. Is one of those substances that is especially important to always have a sitter. um I mean, maybe the only exception is like, hey, if you've done it hundreds of times, and you're only taking a very small dose, it's like, yeah, probably you'll be fine. But if you're taking like a medium to high dose, always have somebody to watch over you. Um, but don't allow them to be, you know, like if they're playing like first person shooter games, or like they're like reading pornography, or they're like very irritated and like, you know, writing an angry email, like you don't want that energy. You don't, like, it's just gonna be bad mixed with 5-MeO. If they're praying, if they're meditating, if they're like listening to sacred music, awesome, awesome, that's perfectly fine. I think honestly, probably the most important is for them to be sending you loving kindness, right? Like for them to be, yeah, it's fine if they're reading a book or a novel. As again, the content matters a little bit, but the most important thing is that they're like keeping an eye on you and sending you love, and that you feel that love, whether it's real or not. Like having that perception, having that kind of like field of awareness, that sense of harmony matters a whole lot. Okay, So I've said a lot. We're already kind of like 80 minutes in. I'm gonna just use a last metaphor and then conclude, which is that uh, there's a sense in which 5-MeO, it's a little bit kind of like this, in that like, okay, if this is your state of consciousness, usually you're kind of like, life takes you out, kind of like jitters you, and you move a little bit this way, you'll move a little bit this way, but the ball always kind of like rolls back to its basin. What happens is that 5-MeO DMT pushes you with escape velocity. And then you're kind of like, oh, you're just going to be rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling down an energy landscape that is very unfamiliar. Um, and it usually involves something kind of like everything wanting to synchronize with everything else: your subconscious, your conscious, your body, your vascular system, your visual system, your auditory system. You know, they don't always do it. And sometimes they synchronize in a way that produces a lot of dissonance. And, ideally, they synchronize in such a way that you get a very clean global mode, which is very related to the jhanas and very related to awakening and centerlessness. Um, all of which, yeah, 10 years ago, I would say, oh, only a crackpot would speak that way. But no, it's true. It's true. So the point is, it's a very sensitive thing. Like, the context matters a lot, because the moment you're actually at the top of it, right? Like, it's kind of like you're at top of this huge mountain, right? And like any tiny push in any direction will really dramatically change the direction, right? And doing a lot of loving kindness, every day going to a loving kindness retreat, jhana retreat, cultivating joy, etc., is kind of like creating grooves in that mountain, so to speak. So that, yes, it's unpredictable at the end of the day, but like the ball is much more likely to go that way. So you want those grooves inside you, right? Like the meditation grooves, the joy grooves, the loving kindness grooves. So, and they become really obvious in the state. Like, there's nowhere to hide when you're in that state. It's very obvious if you've done your homework, so to speak, or if you've been not doing it. Like, if you I mean, it's like a kind of like radical self honesty that happens in that state. So you can't hide from yourself. So again, yeah, my recommendation is, yeah, put in the time, put in the effort. Every effort counts. It really makes a big difference. So, okay, I said a lot. In future videos, I will, yeah, maybe talk more specifics about like the phenomenology of 5-MeO, the different levels, also compare it to DMT. I might even talk about the combination of 5-MeO DMT and DMT. However, I will say, very, 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 very important. That's a very dangerous, psychologically, it's probably physiologically fine, but it's psychologically very dangerous combination. So don't do it, is my generic advice. If you have done hundreds of 5-MeO experiences and hundreds of DMT experiences, maybe start with like a very small amount of one and a normal amount of the other, but be very careful. And don't interpret this as like, oh, Andres is cautioning this, that must mean that it's particularly interesting, like I should do it. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, you're gonna seriously get psychologically hurt by that. Even just DMT or just 5-MeO, you can get seriously psychologically hurt by that. So like, you know, don't, be very, very careful. Be very careful. And yeah, I mean, that's it. That's it. So loving kindness to all of you. Infinite bliss. Be safe, first of all. And yeah, let's work towards the benefit of all beings. And infinite bliss, everybody. Ciao.